Oh, what is going on, New York Giant fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. If you're watching this video, you may be asking yourself, Chris, why are you talking so slow? Before I give you the reason for that, if you guys have any suggestions on the channel, please drop them in the comments below, whether it be video ideas, whether it be improvements on the channel. And that's exactly what I'm working towards. I got one of these suggestions yesterday, and I'm not trying to poke fun at Paul. I was just trying to, a little bit of a joke at the beginning of this video to show you that I'm trying to work on slowing myself down. Paul, I don't know if you're from New York. New York is a rapid place, and maybe that has something to do with why I talk as fast as I do. It's just in my nature. It's just who I am, and I do think subconsciously when I try to get these videos out for you guys in a timely manner, especially when there's a lot to go over, I try to do it as fast as I can, because at the end of the day, in today's modern society, people want things quick. They don't want the news within 30 minutes. They want it within 12. So maybe that has something to do with it as well. But Paul, I will make it a concerted effort, because I do agree with you when I listen back to some of my videos, to slow it down just a bit. But this is coming out from Paul. Hey, just some honest feedback. You're really hard to listen to because you talk way too fast. I feel like I'm listening to an auctioneer. I can't get halfway through one of your vids without my head starting to hurt. Have you ever considered a career as an auctioneer? I have not, but it's something I will look into. Matter of fact, I'll practice right now. Going once, going twice, 3 times. Sold to Paul. When you gave me that comment, Paul, I actually remember this week, Bad Dog actually was having migraines. So I got to talk to Bad Dog. It may be due to the fact that he's been watching my videos. But no, all kidding aside, Paul, I'm sorry if I hurt your head. I will try to work on those things. Just messing with you, man. But in this video, let's get on with it. We did 2 minutes of joking. Let's jump into the main story of the day. The main story of the day for me is the Saquon Barkley news. This came out yesterday from Jordan Renan on Twitter, and we know right now as a fan base that not just Barkley, but several players on this team, the owner, the head coach, the fan base is furious, and they're looking for things to complain about. Saquon Barkley is an easy target. I'll go over my reasoning throughout this video, what I think is justified and what is not, in terms of the criticism that Saquon Barkley has gotten this year by New York Giants fans. I think some of it is justified. I think some of it is not. That's just my opinion on the matter. If you're watching this, you may disagree. I'll be the first to say I love Saquon Barkley. But at the end of the day, I do not think he will be in the long-term plans of this football team. Too many injuries, the fact you're moving on from the general manager, you're bringing a new guy in. He's not going to probably see it as the best option to extend this guy on a second contract, especially with the way that the guy has produced. So I definitely understand where fans are coming from, and it is one of the, if not the, one of the biggest black eyes on Dave Gettleman's tenure here. The fact that he selected a running back second overall, where at this point, if you go back and you play Monday morning GM, it was not a good decision at all not to start the rebuild in 2018. So we all understand that, and I think all of that comes into play in terms of, the people that are really hammering home how much they dislike Saquon Barkley at this point in time. But let's first jump into the story. Following a humiliating loss to the Philadelphia Eagles in Week 16, Barkley avoided stepping to the podium, instead allowing Devontae Booker and quarterback Jake Fromm and Mike Glennon to face the heat. On Monday, Barkley again avoided reporters despite several requests for him to speak. We're going to jump into the exact tweet now from Renan. Saquon Barkley not making himself available to talk after the game and the day after, despite continual requests, plus leaving Glennon, Fromm, and Booker to speak for the struggling offense post-game, is not ideal for a team captain. Blowing off responsibility, bad look. He then later went on to say Eli Manning used to talk Mondays only after losses, so other guys wouldn't have to stand there and take the tough questions. He willingly took it on his own shoulders to take pressure off of others. And I think it is a fair criticism. I do. I'm not going to say that I'm going to absolutely destroy Saquon Barkley for this. Listen, I'll be the first to say I feel that he sometimes is a content creator. Barkley, I can't even imagine for somebody like that. And yes, I recognize he makes millions of dollars. He's a captain. He's a leader. It is not a good look to make guys like Devontae Booker go out there and field the tough questions from the media. So yes, in this instance, I think it is fair to criticize Saquon Barkley's handling of this. Do I think Jordan Renan may have been taking a shot at a low-hanging fruit, knowing that the fan base is looking for blood? Perhaps. And only Jordan could truthfully answer that question for you, but I do think it's a fair criticism. As far as comparing it to Eli Manning to me is the quarterback. It's a little bit different, but we all know Eli Manning, the way that he handled himself in a New York Giants uniform was nothing but class. He never pointed the finger at anybody else, and Saquon Barkley, for the most part, has been that way as well. The fact that he is not taking questions, though, being that he is a captain of the team, granted, we don't know what's going on in his personal life, but I do think it's fair to question why he's not up there, at being that he is the face of the franchise, especially with Daniel Jones currently not playing. The fact that he's a captain and the most well-known player on that offense, I understand. Do I think the fan base has been a little overly critical of Barkley this year? Yes, I do. You know, we use the offensive line excuse for Daniel Jones all the time. Well, it's not any better for Saquon Barkley. And then people will point to Devontae Booker, and yes, Booker is averaging more yards per carry. Booker did have one carry in this past game, though, however, that was for 16 yards on a 3rd and 20, where they were, basically gave it to him. So, and that kind of altered his yards per carry. But Booker, for the most part, has at least been on par with Saquon Barkley. And when you draft a running back 2nd overall, you expect a lot more. Barkley, of course, is coming off the ACL tear. Many people thought going into this year it could take another year before he is fully recovered, both mentally and physically. At this point, I think the bigger problem is the mental aspect of Saquon Barkley's game, but he also just does not look as explosive as he did in his rookie year. And as a Giants fan, all I hope for next year is that he fully recovers, and he does look like the player that we all saw and loved his rookie year. Obviously, injuries have played a major part, and I don't think he'll be in the long-term plans of this football team. That doesn't mean I'm not going to root my ass off for him every game that he does play in a New York Giants uniform, and I wish him nothing but success in the future wherever he may end up. But the fact of the matter is we're not winning games. You were the number 2 overall pick. I understand where the frustration from the fan base is coming from. Joe Judge then was asked about it. I'm going to be completely transparent and honest with you right now. I don't pay a lot of attention to who gets asked to speak after the game or appear through the weeks, Judge said. I know that I see him at the podium a lot of times when I'm walking off the field from practice. I know I see him a good deal dealing with the media. I don't know his individual schedule. I can tell you, because Senior Vice President of Communications Pat Hanlon and I talked about this kind of walking in the hallway earlier, but I guess there are some reports about him not being available. I can tell you for a fact after the game was over that he was getting his normal treatment and was with the trainers for a good amount of time. And if I remember correctly, I think Barkley did come off with at least a minor injury during that game. Between that shower, getting dressed, we were obviously driving back on the buses. There was a kind of hurried emphasis of getting everybody out of the locker room on Sunday. And I'm sure Joe Judge is trying to defend his player. For sure. And after the game, maybe that is a legitimate excuse based off the fact that he came up a little bit limping. But the next day, probably should have made himself open to the media. Is it something I'm going to go bananas and crazy about? No. But in a climate like this, right now with this fan base, any little thing that fans have to complain about, they're going to do it. And I think Barkley needs to realize that. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really pay a lot of attention to who the players are talking to media-wise, but I'll make sure Pat addresses that, and we'll see if Judge is anything that needs to be adjusted based on league policy, Judge said, regarding Saquon Barkley. So there you have it. Do I think Barkley probably should have addressed the media? 100%. A mistake on his part. It's not a good look as a captain to force, your other teammates to go out there and field the tough questions. You're the face of the team. It is your job. It is your responsibility to, if you're going to get credited when the team's good, you got to take the blame when the team's bad. And like Renan said, Eli Manning was the epitome of that. Never pointed the finger at anybody else. And outside of this, to my knowledge, Barkley has been a great teammate for the New York Giants. You always say, he says great things about Daniel Jones, but I got to be fair in my thought process. In this instance, probably not a good look for Saquon Barkley. Now I wanted to jump into the playoff picture. Not the playoff picture, rather, the draft scenario for the New York Giants. Currently, the New York Giants sit with the 5th and 8th selections. If you go to tankathon.com, tried to explain this as best as I could to you guys during my live stream on yesterday, or 2 days ago, when I was going over what the tiebreakers are. If you look at it right now, I expanded it above my face. The tiebreaker is the 4th column over the strength of schedule. Right now, the New York Giants sit at 4-11. However, they are in last out of the 3 teams. Houston, the Jets, and the Giants, all at 4-11. The reason being, the Giants' strength of schedule in that column is 541, the Jets at 514, and Houston at 494. So for the Giants to move up at all. They would need either the Jets or Houston to win one of their last two games, and the Giants would have to lose both. We know the Giants' upcoming schedule, that of course being the Bears and Washington, and any team the Giants play, they will probably lose based on the state of this franchise right now, but no guarantees. It's not like the Bears are great, even though they're coming off a decent win against Seattle. But yeah, that's the only way, and we'll go over every team's schedule, but that is the only way the Giants can move up. They would need to lose the remaining two games, and the Jets or Houston, one of them, would have to win one of the remaining two games. Of course, if both teams had at least one win, the Giants could potentially move up to 3 if they were to lose both. Chicago, all the way right now down at 8 after they beat Seattle, does have a bit of a cushion, but I'll explain something that you may want to worry about if you're worried about the draft position with that pick. But right now, there is a cushion. Chicago right now sits at 5-10. For them to even tie with the teams after the 9th pick, they would have to win both their games. Atlanta, Denver, Minnesota, New Orleans, and Cleveland all sit with 7 wins. And I'm not going to go over all of their schedules. I'll go over Minnesota's because they do play Chicago the last game of the year. But I would say the furthest they could drop is probably 11 or 12 because I don't think all those teams are going to lose their remaining 2 games. Even after this week, no matter what happens, Chicago at worst will still be the 8th pick. The reason being, the only team that is within 1 game's distance of that 5-10 record is Washington at 6-9. However, if you look over at the strength of schedule column, Washington's is 5-3-3. Chicago's is 5-1-6. While Chicago, that will only go down due to the fact that they're playing the New York Giants. So even with a Chicago win, they will not go any lower, at least for this week, than the 8th pick. That is locked in, even if they beat the New York Giants. The Giants will be locked into 5 if both the Jets and Houston lose. However, if one wins and the Giants lose, they could move up a draft spot. But let's go over the remaining schedule for all these teams and talk about how far that Chicago pick, Bears pick could potentially fall. This is the Texans' remaining schedule. We talked about how Houston has to win at least 1 game. Don't bank on it. They're playing a San Francisco 49ers team on the road, and I know that Davis Mills has been playing well. Houston's been putting up points. They have 72 points in their last 2 contests, but you're asking a lot if you think they're going to go on the road and beat a San Francisco team that is desperate to win. Granted, Jimmy Garoppolo is not playing in that game. Trey Lance is. We'll see how Lance does, so maybe Houston could pull an upset. The game after that, I think it'll depend on whether or not Tennessee has anything to play for. It is in Houston, but Tennessee, if they win this week, I didn't look over their schedule, will have the division locked up, and who knows if they can move up or down in the seeding. We have to wait and see how the rest of the schedule plays out this week. But if that game means nothing for Tennessee, it is possible that Houston could come out with a victory. So if they win one of their last 2 games and the Giants lose both, they would move up above Houston. But of course, playing 2 tough opponents. The next team that would need to win one is the New York Jets. They're playing the Bucs this week. That's probably a loss. That's a game that the Bucs absolutely need. They're still fighting to try to get that number 1 seed from within the NFC conference. And then the Bills, they're definitely not taking any days off with that game. More than likely, they're going to need that game to make the playoffs. That game's in Buffalo. Divisional battle. You never know, I suppose. I remember there was a game during Rex Ryan's tenure when they had, maybe it wasn't Rex Ryan, but when Ryan Fitzpatrick was the quarterback for the Jets needed a win to get into the playoffs the last week, and the Buffalo Bills upset them when they were not nearly as good as the New York Jets. Maybe the Jets could return the favor. Wouldn't bank on it. My guess would be the Jets will probably lose both of these games. Houston may stand a better chance based off the way they've been playing as of late, and the fact that that game may not mean much for Tennessee the last week of the season. So, more than likely, I don't see the Giants moving up. I think they're probably capped at 5, maybe 4, if Houston were to win a game and the Giants were to lose their 2 remaining. Now we're going to look at the Seahawks. Wanted to look at them because right now the Seahawks, if you look at the draft board, which I want to just show you guys where they currently stand, they are the 6th pick, which is owned by the New York Jets, but they have the same record as Chicago. So if they were to lose a game, to win a game rather, Chicago could potentially jump them, right? And Chicago would move up to 7. Well, this is Seattle's remaining schedule. They play the Lions this week at home. The Lions have been playing better as of late, but you would have to think Seattle stands a good chance to win that game. Then they play the Cardinals. The Cardinals have been struggling. Divisional battle in Arizona. I think a lot of it would depend on whether or not that game means anything for the Arizona Cardinals, depending on seeding. But Seattle could certainly win at least 1. The thing is, I think Chicago will probably beat the Giants, so I don't think it'll matter. I don't think that Chicago will jump Seattle. Then you got the Carolina Panthers. Same story here. The Carolina Panthers, if we go back to the standings, the Carolina Panthers are sitting at the same record at 5-10. So I think it's another team that the Chicago Bears could potentially jump. So I wanted to look at their schedule. They play the Saints. The Saints right now sit with 7 wins. They look horrible. Ian Book is their starting quarterback. That game could go either way. The Panthers have been slumping down the stretch, and then that Bucs game at the end of the year. So I see at most probably 6 wins for the Panthers. So again, I don't really see the Bears surpassing them. So I think the Bears are probably going to be in that 7 to 8 range in terms of at best for the New York Giants. I don't really see them jumping up too much from where they currently are. The Vikings, I think, is an interesting team to look at because that's a team with 7 wins that potentially could be jumped by the Chicago Bears because the Bears play them the last week of the season. And I think the Vikings will, in fact, lose this week to the Green Bay Packers. And if they lose to the Bears the last week of the season, the Bears would actually drop back even further. So the way I see the draft position right now, in the end, I think it'll probably end up right around where both teams currently are. There could be a little bit of movement one way or the other. Chicago, probably the furthest I could see them dropping is 11 or 12. The highest I could see them getting is like 6 or 7, but I think 8 is probably where they're going to be, especially being that I think they will beat the New York Giants this week based off the way that the New York Giants have looked as of late. The Giants, they need some help to move up. Even if they lose their last 2 games, they would need the Jets, or they use the Texans to pull off a big upset. I think the Giants will be picking 5 when all is said and done. I think the Bears will probably be between 8 and 10. I think that's where our picks will be at season's end, but we'll have to wait and see how the rest of the season plays out, and you're definitely rooting for the Vikings the last week of the season against the Chicago Bears. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.